Great.
Okay?
Thank you very
He's
much.
the master, because we are benefiting from him, right? Made for Life is a good fruit for us.
I think what's important this morning is that we really focus on this thing of purpose, because there seems to be such a connection in terms of what we're sharing. And I was taking notes in the very first book that exists. And this is Map for Life, as it was when I went to the very first bookstore. That's what I literally showed them and sold. And it's interesting today how many people want to have something that looks far more sophisticated. They're not satisfied with just the book. They want brochures, they want clothing, they want even to drive a fancy car up to the bookstore to be able to go and sell them. That's how it began. And you know why they bought this book? It was because of the passion in which the message was conveyed to them. And so when you're passionate about something, people buy into it. You know, I went up to the lady in one of the salespeople in the bookstore, and I asked them where the self-help section was, and she responded by saying that would defeat the purpose. If she told me. I want to share something with you this morning that is really, and Johan, I'll settle down here somewhere in the middle. I want to share something with you this morning that ties in with the 17th of September this year. Because before I heard this word of prepare for the flood, I'd been thinking about Map for Life very, very specifically. And there was something that struck me about this concept of mapping the world. You know, I've been saying to people for many years, be mapped. And the term was MAPD, you know, be mapped. And we had the sense was that it stands for make a purposeful difference. Originally I wrote make a positive difference, and that is not good enough. We need to make a purposeful difference. There needs to be intent, there needs to be meaning in terms of what we do. But on this Sunday morning, just 3 weeks ago, I began to look at it a little bit differently, and I realized at the end of this exercise I was doing that the world has already been mapped. What do I mean by that? Well, very simply, tying in with what Terence had on the board this morning, which was the timeline. When he said TT, I had a different picture in my mind from when I was younger, but because there was a term used in the Eastern Cape, which kind of tied into that, so I've got to try and get that image out of my mind. But when he put up the Terence, the timeline, I saw something that I had seen earlier this morning, and that was the word mandate. It's actually made up of two words. It's kind of our time. It's your mandate. You know, before that you're a spirit. Today, in the fact that you're here in the flesh it's your mandate. There's a beginning and an end. So I don't need to go and decide whether I actually have a mandate or not. The very fact that I'm here means that I have been mandated. And so when you arrived in this kind of bundle of joy, it was the beginning of your mandate. And so when I say the world is mapped, the first part is that God has already mandated you. You are here for a very specific purpose. He sent you to fulfill it. We don't need to discuss or argue that point. By the way, scientists can only tell you how things work. They can't tell you why things work. For example, if you asked a scientist why a kettle was boiling, they would immediately begin to explain to you the conversion of energy from the plug point into exciting the molecules of water inside the element, that they begin to energize and vibrate at higher speeds, and eventually they leave in the form of steam and we have a boiling kettle. But the reality is The kettle could be boiling because you or I wanted a cup of tea. The scientists can't say that. And so we end up listening to scientists who can only tell us how things work, not why things work. And so we come up with all kinds of theories of evolution and everything else. God has a mandate for you. He has a mandate for me. The second thing that is very evident is that you have been anointed. You have a special anointing on your life. We use other terms. We talk about gifts and talents. And when you see somebody operating in their gift, you kind of marvel at what they do, because they are anointed in that area. And so maybe the term anointing has become a word that is used within a spiritual context or within a church environment, but its real meaning is that you are absolutely gifted beyond any question, that when people see you operating in that, they just have to marvel at what you do. Why? Because it comes absolutely natural to you, and you do it with a smile on your face and effortlessly. And so before you arrived on the planet, you had already been given these gifts and talents, and so you had been anointed to fulfill the mandate for which you had been sent. Right here. And by the way, the mandate has always got a link to a need. So there was a need that preceded your creation. And that need defined the gifts and talents that you should have. And so here you are, mandated, not only mandated, but also anointed. And here's the interesting thing. Your purpose for which you have been mandated and which you have been anointed has also been fully and completely provisioned. All of the resources necessary for you to fulfill the purpose for which you've been created have also been created. The people, everything that's necessary for that to be fulfilled is not your responsibility. All you and I have to do is step in faith, and when we do, the resources necessary for the next step are revealed. If you are not seeing the resources right now, it's because you're sitting on your rusty dusty and not doing anything. Faith requires action. Faith is a doing word. As soon as you stop, as soon as you procrastinate, you are acting in fear. And when I say acting in fear, you can't act in fear. Fear is a passive thing. Fear causes paralysis. Fear causes you to retreat. And procrastination is just one of those words that describe fear. So you are mandated, you are anointed, and you are fully provisioned. The provision that is there for your purpose is at the point of need. It's not here. It's not where I am right now. It's at the point of need. So I can know with absolute certainty that when it comes to a mandate like Map the World, that every single person, every single resource, everything necessary for that mandate to be fulfilled already exists and will exist in the physical at the time of need. You know, the spiritual realm is far more real than the physical. I mean, right now the future exists inside your mind, inside your heart. What you see over here in physical form is a reflection of the past. Somebody a long time ago had a vision of this facility. Today we are in this facility that was in their mind and nobody else could see it. And so the concept of seeing is believing is flawed. You've got to believe first in order to see. So the same thing when it comes to your provision. You've got to believe it, you've got to be able to see it, and then you've got to act as if it already exists. So you are mandated. Not only have you don't need anyone else's authority, by the way. You don't need anyone else's approval. You don't need any special qualification. You don't need any kind of clothing. You don't need any kind of house. You don't need all that stuff. You have been mandated by the very person who created you. So stop striving for all those other little badges to put on so that you can measure up. You are a unique, one of a kind masterpiece that God created. Stop questioning the way He made you. You're mandated, you're anointed, you're provisioned. And finally, you are destined. And Terence was talking about that. The concept that Miles Monroe was bringing across with this term destined, it means that the destination, the destiny for which God has called you, cannot be influenced by any other thing. The circumstances that you go through in life, the situation you find yourself in, the challenges, the difficulties that the world wants you to look at are all things that can help define and develop your character. It's got nothing to do with stopping you from reaching your destiny. The only thing that can stop you from reaching your destiny is when you stop. When you begin to believe in fear. In other words, you put your trust in the fear that surrounds you instead of the person who created you. So your destiny is defined, it's determined, it's there for you. You've just got to align yourself with that. And I love the analogy that Terence was using, is that it pursues you, this destiny. It will cause you to feel discomfort. It will cause you to feel emotional. It will cause you to feel all kinds of things because it wants you to be on track, in the right place, in that place of gifting, in that place of anointing. There's some people that get involved in all kinds of good things. One of my greatest challenges was I had a sense that I needed to be a pastor when I was growing up, because I believed that was the only thing that actually could help you get the next step. And I couldn't see myself ever standing inside the four walls talking to a bunch of people who agreed with me. I had to be outside the four walls. And so when I started with Map for Life, I was in a place where I felt guilty because I wasn't standing behind a pulpit somewhere. And today you're going to be in a place where you can hear from the very person who changed my entire perception of what it meant to be doing the work of God. And maybe Peter will share a bit of his story, but I'll never forget. On the 23rd, it was a Tuesday morning, here in Eagle's Nest Conference Center, which is much bigger now than it was back then. And I have to say this with respect. This old toppy stood up at the back of the room at the end of the day. I say old toppy because I was a young guy. You know, if anybody was my age back then, they would be talking to me as the old toppy in the room. And I was standing there. There was a 16-year-old guy right in front of me. And this man stands up at the back at the end of the day, and he makes a statement. He says, "This book has changed my life." And in that instant, and maybe Peter can share a bit of that story, but in that instant I realized that I could be following my passion and doing what I loved and still be connected to the Great Commission. And that enabled me to continue and not feel guilty about the things that I thought I should be doing. And today I think there's many people in places, they're doing it because they feel guilty and it's not their passion. You know, a friend of mine, John Stanker, stood up one day and said, you know, he really was struggling to get up to go to church. He just really didn't feel like going there on Sunday morning. And his mother eventually kicked him out of bed and said, "You better go there, because they need the pastor to speak." Because John was the pastor, and he said, "You know, if you don't feel like going to church in the morning and you're the pastor, there's something wrong." And I think today there's many people that are in that kind of place. They're doing something simply because they feel they're obligated to do it, when in actual fact they're supposed to be outside the walls, not inside. And so this morning I just want to say that you are mandated. You have been anointed. You are fully provisioned. You can access it in faith. Don't look around you to the evidence of the things that are in the present, because what you are dealing with is the future, and you've got to step into it. And when you step into that future, you will bring forth or reveal the things that already exist, ready for that next step. And then lastly, you're destined. There's an absolute permanence in that statement. And I trust that as we journey together, we're going to begin to uncover important things about this world that we are not familiar with. We've been indoctrinated that, number one, we are here by accident. That our anointing is of no value and must be superseded by or replaced with a learned skill. And we put our children and we've put ourselves through all kinds of education in order to acquire a skill to impress society, when in reality, and we bury the anointing that we were given. We end up, when it comes to provision, I've seen it over and over and over again. People write down goals, incredible goals, but they discover there's an obstacle, and the obstacle is they don't have the money, or they don't have the education, or they don't have the ability, or in general they don't have the provision. So they relinquish their goal. They set their goal aside and they create a new goal. And the new goal is to go and acquire the provision. And they spend the rest of their life going to acquire the provision, because society has taught us that God does not exist. He does not provide. I've got to do the provision. And consequently, the entire life is trying to provide for themselves. And then lastly, there are people there that say, you choose your destination. You choose your destiny. And so we're here sitting in this place trying to define something that we were never born to define. And we find ourselves in a heap, in a mess, trying to find the answer, trying to come up with something ourselves. You don't have to. They say sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees. And that's what purpose is like. Everybody else looks at you and they're so clear and obvious what your gifting and talent is and what you should be engaged in, but you can't see it. Why? Because you're not looking in the right place. And so when it comes to being mapped, I truly believe that the world is already mapped. They just don't know it. And so our objective is to get out there and reveal it to them so that they can take up their mandate, that they can operate in the anointing, that they can reveal the provision, and that they can reach their destiny. I trust that from today you will acknowledge that you are indeed mapped, and step out that door today, not out of this room, but into your mandate, and go and touch lives and transform people. Thank you very much.